Kenneth is ready to just rock and roll.
Next.
Yeah, I don't know whether everybody did see while Kenneth was getting queued up. It was too funny. David Crabtree and Deputy Secretary Richard, if you didn't get to see that. It was pretty funny. Well, in North Carolina, we say Richard, and then he still closes with Mr. Richard Richard.
It was good. I enjoyed it.
Is that how they call you anymore?
Well, the truth is that my great-grandfather, actually great-grandfather, changed it from Richard to Richard when we moved into the city because there was such prejudice against Cajuns. And,
Really?
which I always thought was kind of funny, as though people would not have figured out that it was Richard. But apparently he thought that worked. So.
I wasn't a lot of people did that though. We were can't hear it.
It was going backwards.
That was funny. It's probably on WREL. If y'all didn't see it, Dave did really well. So
It is.
you may want to check it out.
What's the perfect color of the game all the way through? But it is on there, yes.
So for home modifications,
I just have to stand.
we left everything basically the same. We changed cover modifications may include but are not limited to, so it's not an exhaustive list any longer. So we went down here, we left the same list. Again, the modifications lists are exhaustive, that's struck through, we deleted. And then of course, the exclusion list, as we tighten it up, may become a little bit longer. But we're trying to make it more open and not so based on just these blocks.
This is an eye test. It's all we can afford. So, you should be able to
Thanks. Community service.
Is that the first go? Did you look into the issue of the structures owned by a trust? You could have to have blocks.
Oh, you're supposed to be
We have
excluded.
to figure it out.
That's
Yeah.
I think that gets into a restriction.
There's a few of those.
Oh. Oh, it's on restriction. Depending on where you're putting the lots.
You would. We want to get,
So is there any,
Okay, thank you.
Ah.
You can do that last time?
There we go.
No, we never had it.
We didn't ask for the
yeah, we're supposed to turn it in.
Any questions or suggestions for this? So again, as well, at the bottom, it'll still be that combination of $50,000 add-on, which will be the combination of assistive technology, which is remain the same, so you guys like that one, and the home operations. And that's over the duration.
We're down here on this, still talking about the exclusions. Page 2, lots are not a cover modification. Is the thought restrictive interventions here? Are we talking about locks on windows, smart home technology where you've got a smart lock on the door that can be opened and closed remotely?
I think if you're looking at alert systems, but when you're actually talking about restrictive locks, we can't cover.
Well, right. But that's
Okay,
So I need to
what
make
kind?
that
What?
clear.
I'm sorry.
We need to, I think we can clarify that.
That's what I'm talking about.
So key locks, when the individual is able to use a key lock, a keyless lock, when they are unable to use a key.
And you have some more.
Those are covered?
No, that's the questions being asked.
Is it a restricted lock that is a safety issue for the consumer?
We can't include locks.
That's not that big of a deal, but I was going to say, there are locks that have like a code that you can have with the fire department or the police department where if emergency personnel needed to access easily without breaking the door down, they would have that in their system that they could gain access with that code. It would also make caregivers the ability to get in and you know. So I honestly feel that the keyless entry type locks should be considered, but
Right.
it's $100, so, you know,
Well, I think that's what they're saying here, is just the way it's written now, it
under
excludes every lock.
under that self-directed $2,000 component, those locks could be paid for that if you have justification, so.
Good comment.
Signaling systems such as someone opens the window,
Alert
Alarm
systems,
is off.
alert systems are coverable now. So, yeah.
Okay.
Katie could get blue buttons?
What?
Automatic door openers. Under 8? F? Katie loves blue buttons. I always joke when we're out in public and we use the blue buttons and all the people in the public look at us because they never noticed the blue buttons before. And I say, Katie loves blue buttons. I wish I could get them at home. I didn't know I could get them at home.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh my gosh.
Actually bypass the lock. You're talking about the things that you push to open the door, right?
Thank you. Are.
Blue buttons, how fun!
Yeah.
Oh, you guys, I'm going to write it in next year's plan. I'm going to get her doctor to write a prescription. Oh, that's so
What I
fun.
want you to do, though, is to say that, look what the state did for me.
She is going to love her blue buttons. In fact, we could get her a reverse blue button to keep me in the office.
Just one quick question.
Because I have an office she's not allowed in, so we could put a blue button for her to keep me in.
The community,
Fun.
the new community service that's, you know, the
Standards.
one we were talking about before,
Right. Oh, yeah.
is that considered residential services or is that outside of residential? Because these modifications don't pertain to residential, so.
That's outside of residential.
Okay, okay, good, thank you.
Okay.
How fun.
Close this one down.
I'm good.
What's next?
We've done no modifications, we've done day supports. Assistive technology is the same. Do you guys want to look at that one more time?
I don't think so.
Do you want to save it for the end if nothing's changed?
Okay. We'll go over crisis services. So we left this one very similar too. One thing that we heard from you guys is that acute crises aren't necessarily due to mental health or complex behavioral changes, that they can just be acute crises. So we struck through that it has to be due to behavioral or mental health. Scroll down.
Okay.
The in-home crisis supports, it's in the individual's home, and we clarified that you could do that in a private home or if you're in an AFL. And then we just moved around, so we moved in-home above out-of-home because out-of-home is more intensive. And then there was a statement about a neuropsychologist or a psychiatrist on every team, and we took that out as well. But, I must have accepted the change, but it was right here, so it's not that, not as intensive to not have those discussions. Any questions on this one? So those were your main issues the first time, is that the acute crisis issue. You don't have to, it doesn't have to be a mental health or complex behavior.
The only question I have, because over these last 5 years, we've seen with my son's case and a number of other clients that I have assisted in advocacy, where their crisis plan, or, well, no, let me rephrase that. Their behavior plan was moved into their crisis plan, and quite frankly, it reduced their level of care. And I have basically told any parent that's parent or guardian or whatever to, you know, revisit a behavior plan, because you have to understand what is in place. So this is not indicative of a behavior plan. I mean, a behavior plan could be part of this, but not, this isn't for behavior is for crisis, like a medical crisis or,
Right, it could be.
It could be a
It could
behavior.
for an acute crisis, right.
That maybe it wouldn't be handled under your behavior support plan. Maybe it's a separate crisis that occurred.
okay.
This
But
would
it
be
can,
additional
right,
support.
and it can also be used to, support things that are in the behavior plan.
Okay. Thank you.
On the last page, are there competency requirements?
Oh, yeah, they have to be.
Hold on.
Right, so we'll have to determine what exactly the competency requirements are. It has the specifications of who would provide it here. That was more of a comment of, would we need to have separate competencies? And we asked you guys that questions before, but we didn't get any specific feedback. So that question is still remaining.
Let's say you probably don't need that trauma informed care. I think that's what the bullet number 2 from the staff qualifications.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
Trauma informed care is likely not necessary for every person receiving the service.
Right. I would think that this would be an area that would have to be very very tailored to that individual's needs. Because when you were talking about a psychiatrist, for instance, well, there's some clients that would absolutely be necessary. I'm not saying you need to require it, but just like she was talking about for trauma care, not every person's going to need that, but it could be written into their crisis planning.
And I think they've covered that when they said you have to have access.
Right.
That whoever's providing this must have access in case you need it.
Right.
I think with actually the individuals who are working directly with them, you've got the 1-year experience of working with crisis. And it may be worth adding some statement about, or something related to what's identified in the person-centered plan is that, individualized issues. If somebody has, what I'm saying, a real specific issue, then you want to make sure somebody who has knowledge of that particular area is working with them, not just
Right.
anybody from the organization just because they've got 1-year experience.
And I'll give you a good example of just what you're saying. As a guardian, my son has extreme medical issues. Well, I'm not going to have somebody else walking in and dictating what needs to get addressed. I will be the one that makes that determination. I can reach out to everyone on that team. Anybody you dictate is available to me for assistance. But ultimately, that guardian's going to have to be the one to decide what is going to take place, because you couldn't even learn my son's medical stuff in 2 years if you tried. I'm just saying. So, we need some kind of wording there that protects the individual from, someone on this team overriding a guardian. You're going to end up with a lot of hot water on that. Ultimately, someone has to make the final decisions in the event of crisis. And it's not going to be somebody with 1 year or 2 years experience in crisis intervention. It better land with the people that are responsible for their care and know that individual. You've got some verbiage to reword there.
Can we put a board-certified behavior analyst, one of the types of people, the crisis staff,
H2,
on page 2, shall have access to, or does it have to, you're limiting it to a variety of nurse practitioners, physicians, assistants?
I think that's for the med part.
Yeah, but then there's also board-certified psychiatrist.
Right. Now, see, that would be acceptable.
Couldn't it be
Under that,
CBA?
the next one, for psychologists.
Yeah, but
Or
could it be,
CBA.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
what it would be.
Now, see, that would be acceptable, because if my son's neurologist or psychiatrist is, if I had a doctor saying this is what's necessary for your son, that's the person I'm going to rely on.
Say it again?
I said, what she is saying, it makes sense. It needs to be either the psychiatrist, the primary care physician, the neurologist, somebody specializing in that area of crisis. needs to be the one to make recommendations to the guardian and go, this is what we need to do. Because I rely on all the recommendations of my son's doctors, and I have a massive team. And what their recommendations are what I base what Ben's needs are. So when you're talking about a crisis team, that's who you need to be referring the questions to. What does this individual need right now to deal with the crisis? I mean, you can have somebody that's navigating that, you know, with a 2-year degree or whatever you want to call them, but it's not going to fall back on them to make the decision. It needs to fall back on medical people.
Okay, makes sense. Thank you. Any other?
If the general public, because we were just noticing the provider qualification, you've got one acronym that's not defined anywhere, PIHP.
Prepaid inpatient health plan.
Right.
So
You may just want to include that.
And that's like what Dave was saying before, this would be part of another document, so it would be defined before we can definitely.
Okay.
Well, and I was noticing the same thing on, I was just going to tell you later, but while you're on it, on day support, you talked about the MCO,
yeah,
and you're really talking about the same entity, right? So you can be consistent in language.
Stop coming under, and crisis support, some oversight of,
That-
or mental health issues, do we want that? Or do we want somebody, and, I don't know, do you want or? Somebody who's never worked with somebody with IED.
But you wouldn't want,
Depends on what you're doing.
Well, I think
As appropriate.
yeah, the danger would be is that, yeah. So anybody should be cautious on that, yeah.
Yeah.
Might be a chance to get people to learn.
Or Band-Aid.
Okay, Gary.
Good luck with that. I'm right there with you, but, you know, it's like beating my head on that wall over there. I'm all bloody.
What do you want to say?
I'm just, no.
So you need a crisis
Do you
plan,
need a-
Rose, or a behavior plan?
Do you need a nurse or do you
I'm
need
not
a
the one
doctor?
that needs the plan, okay? This license plan.
okay? So we'll move on to the next.
Which is?
So you just did crisis, we did community transition?
Have we done community transition yet?
Yep.
No.
Good. Oh, this is the one page.
I never felt more talkative on a Monday after a Friday. Not some of you.
It would be okay if it were a Friday with me. I push my wife away.
So community transition, some changes that we've made is that you could basically step down, we included to include PRTFs, psychiatric residential treatment facility, a family home or one-person AFL. We're feeling that this would, especially the family home and one-person AFL, that would allow someone to come out if they would like to into their apartment or home and have some startup funds. So we thought that added some flexibility.
Can I ask a question? So why limit it to the one person AFL?
It was already included in the alternative family living arrangement that's licensed. It's a licensed living arrangement, and we felt that the unlicensed one
Thank you.
would make sense to allow.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for listening and being patient. And I know I was a little zealous when I got here, but it took me 3 hours and I was just like, okay, what do I talk about? I gotta get this out, I gotta get this out, I gotta get this out. Normally I have all my notes in place, but you did this the day after Mother's Day. So thank you all for listening, I appreciate it.
Safe journeys.
Thanks. Gotta go all the way back to last month, I actually stayed over, so.
Then we have community transit service can be accessed one time over the life of the waiver, and before it was one time your entire life. So you were thinking that, sometimes you go back into licensed facilities or something happens, you wanted to allow it at least one time per waiver.
It's good.
Okay.
Yep, I think that's fair.
Any other questions with this one?
Why did we put PRTF in?
But what?
Why did we put PRTF?
Well, we found that we've had some people who end up in PRTF.
Ah.
People end up in PRTFs generally.
I think it's people coming out of them, though.
Right.
Coming out.
But if, we don't want to penalize them.
I would just take somebody to go into one and then come right back out 30 days, which is what happens.
But if
They'll
they're-
not be able to access once the residential program opens up or once long-term opens up. I don't want to get.
Well, but the team decides whether to use this.
Like the waiver, right, and when you get, that's the short of this
Oh, no, this is starter line.
This is if they
So-
come out of the PRTF into their own
one. Okay,
apartment.
then
If you
yes,
have
but not to go
somebody
from the development center into PRT.
Oh,
No, no, no,
no.
This is to get people out so they
See,
can.
I read
get
it
their-
that way, so it's.
So you can have somebody with a primary diagnosis of intellectual or developmental disability who has been in a PRTF.
It's very, very infrequent, but it,
But it happens.
well, it depends on where you live, but
You're right.
It could happen.
we try really, we never say never, but
We're trying not
it's
to
typically
penalize.
not the appropriate setting for an individual with an ID diagnosis.
But also when you start talking about the SAT, it may happen.
Are you coughing with everybody?
Transition.
They're funny, huh?
Okay.
I'm just curious, you didn't list all of the inappropriate placements they could have come from.
Do you have
Should we
any
do that?
diagnosis?
Most of them are like,
Is jail
But you did exclude that one, that's just curious. Okay. It's fine.
Okay.
Faces eyebrows, not just me.
It is not just you.
Close this one down.
But you know what, I'm sorry, she just really did make a really good point for somebody who may have been living in
correctional?
a facility who now has been out and needs assistance in setting themselves up. They would not have anything, and I'm sure there are people with IDD, we hear about it all the time, who have ended up in jail and are coming out. And I would hate for that to exclude, because there are going to be people with nothing trying to get set up into a, now, would it be maybe more of a, I mean, maybe
They
an
wouldn't be getting the
AFL.
services, would
No, I guess they wouldn't
they?
have.
They wouldn't have the services.
No, but you wouldn't have the services if you're coming out. You're getting the services when you get out of jail.
Do you lose them if you go to
Yes.
prison?
Yeah,
You
does
do?
anything for everyone.
Gotta make sure Kirby doesn't do that.
So you're gonna have to come out and get reestablished, and chances are,
Wash your hands.
While you're being reestablished will be your residency that'll be considered then. Okay.
Our prisons are licensed, right?
Oh, the license is already covered.
Different.
It doesn't say license tag.
Okay, we're going on.
wait, before they give us something else.
The law allows wiggle room. I love it.
Let's do respite. Then we'll do residential.
I mean, I didn't read that to see how you handled the AFLs.
Two more. Okay, for respite, well, there's nothing, so originally we gave you this definition that you could use respite if you were living in an AFL situation, licensed or unlicensed. And there was the per diem and the periodic, which is up at the top. The hourly versus the per diem. Then when we brought you the residential supports, we talked about fixing the residential rate so that relief could be built in. We decided to go with allowing the AFLs to be able to access respite. So this definition is the same as the one that you guys originally saw that you were supported for.
Is it only for, it can't be built on the same way?
Can't be built on the same day. Right.
So if I get respite and I am in the AFL, I cannot bill AFL that day.
Correct. Right, ahead.
What?
Now And like we talked about before, that respite can be used in school hours for sickness or injury to make that clarification, because some places, people felt it was having difficulty accessing.
Not my battle. It's up to the AFLs to speak up.
Temporary relief to work.
I have a question on how you're setting the parameters up that if you're leaving midday for respite or you're coming back midday, you're saying you can't bill on situations like that?
For 24-hour period.
Yeah, we talked, when we discussed it, we talked about if you use it today, you can't bill residential today. And if you were to need an hour or two break in there, then that's something that needs to be accommodated. Which is how it is now.
So it's set up as a day rate.
That makes sense, then there would have to be some other support, and there are other supports people can access to get out and to, say, do a community event or something like that. So this would be like, if I wanted to wait for the weekend and I'm an AFL provider, I have an option now versus what I did before.
Or if the individual wants to get away from you.
That's right. Y'all need a break.
You can't have your goal that way up.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that was a really good conversation that allowed you to do other services that same day instead of a daily rate service. To the care coordinators can be educated in how to use that effectively. That was
Right.
a really good conversation.
Okay. Very good. Now we go to residential.
This is my workout. Just in the day.
So for residential, it's very similar to what you guys saw before, with the addition that we clarified, that may be provided in AFLs, and then North Carolina Innovations Respite may also be used for temporary relief to individuals who reside in licensed and unlicensed AFLs. So specific, the rest of it, you guys like for the most part. There was an issue with the residential provider not being responsible when the person's in the day program, something like that. So what we did is we went back to the language that was in there before, that it's not available at the same time of day as the other services. So the residential provider would still have that 24-hour responsibility. And even though it's a per diem rate, it's still, you wouldn't be receiving residential supports in your day supports.
So if the person was sick, the
They would
residential
stay.
supports, and if the person lived in their private home and was sick, then you could use that?
Right.
Got it,
Yeah.
okay. So it's either the residential supports.
Or you can, and then that was your main feedback for this definition. Any questions on this one?
Some clarity to page 1, individuals who are given admitted to the waiver. Is that anybody that's today on, or you've got some period that's a year or less, 2 years or less?
Anyone, that was in there at the beginning of the waiver. So the people who were grandfathered in for the 4 to 6 bed homes, that was at the beginning of this waiver cycle. So anybody admitted
Now
going
would be,
forward
yeah.
cannot live in the facility that's above 6 beds.
Okay. Good.
I hate to ask this, and I'm gonna throw this out, but that clinical description that's under the levels, is that like a standardized, I know we looked at it a long, long time ago, but is that like a standardized document?
Where are you?
Second
Under
page,
levels.
under levels.
So the clinical description is the word that we were using for basically your first page.
What? I'm sorry.
Your budget range from your SIS.
Okay. Is that the same language in the UN policy?
Mhm.
Okay. Because I would have never gotten that from that.
Right.
Okay, so we need to make that clear.
And it's in parentheses in case that title changes.
You mean close?
Well, right.
Community networking?
But I think that one's fairly similar to what we have. The community networking, this we changed a little bit. Before it said service hours should fade, so I put as individuals gain skills and increase home conditions, service hours may fade. I think it was said that it was expected that they would fade. So we made it that it's not necessarily expected. So that was one of the guys' big things from last time. And then, of course, we added the information that it can be used for memberships, which we talked about last time. As long as the memberships are for classes.
Not nice.
So the main change from what you saw last time was this last sentence.
We need that why? I think MCOs will require it to fade with that language.
You don't see that as a problem, utilization being tightened. That's just a natural.
I think the way it's worded is so much better than what it was before, because to me, this doesn't necessarily mean that the UM will see it. It's saying just that if they have learned the skills, then, then it should, then you expect some fading, but before, it really kind of said you had to have fading in the service. And I think that it opens it up. I might be a little Pollyanna on that.
Well, it's a movement in the direction to avoid it being a must.
Mandatory.
And so I think as with the individual budget combined with this, I think you'll see less of forced.
Okay. Because the other definitions don't say it's required, they're.
What is a non-integrated community setting?
Oh, come on.
Non-integrated community setting is going to be your community living support, potentially your day support. Community networking is specifically designed to push the envelope on the integrated activity.
Where is that?
Sort of like we don't know, so we
That
not
second sentence.
We know when we see it. That's showing your age.
So for example, we offer classes in our day supports program, and there could be a fee if someone wanted to privately pay for our program, but they may not do that. That saying it wouldn't cover that. It has to be totally community-based and true innovation.
So it has to do with HCBS, final rule. right?
But we were
That's what
ahead
you're
of the
talking about
curve before the final rule was
Right.
out.
But
The
that's really,
service itself is to encourage. Kind of like individual goods and services, encouraging people to participate in the subtraction.
as long as we follow the state of North Carolina transition plan, all is well.
That's correct. If they approve.
If they approve.
That's not.
Okay. So,
Okay, last is the assisted tech, if anybody else wants to see it, but you said nothing's changed.
Nothing's changed.
So we'll leave it up to you guys, do you want to see it again?
you hear none.
Yeah, on the second page.
Well, maybe something that.
Okay, then we'll end it out.
Sorry.
Oh, we're good catch.
Okay, so this is what you guys' language suggesting, computer hardware will not be authorized solely to improve socialization and education skills. So before I think it said computers and or something else, so I changed it to hardware. And not solely.
What's the difference in a hot tub and a jacuzzi?
Susie's name brand.
Yes, jacuzzi.
Yeah, I was looking at it before, in the other definition, if I were jacuzzi, I would object. You might want to use a generic
Okay.
name.
Get rid of hot.
I mean, no, I think hot tub probably covers it. But in the other one, I forget which one it was.
It'd be a hot tub if you don't have jacuzzi jets, then that's it.
Yeah, that means you put hot water in the bathtub. It's a hot tub.
That's a hot tub.
And then there's a durable medical equipment, portable whirlpool that you can utilize for
Whirlpool.
therapeutic services, which is why we didn't cover jacuzzis, is because you can get the unit that goes into the bathtub through DME.
Yes, I see.
So that's the arcane knowledge for today, that's all I got.
So, on number 4, does that mean computer software would be covered?
I believe it could, right, it could be if it was for communication, things like that. I mean, you may need software
But
for.
I can't buy a computer to run it.
As I recall, the conversation was computer hardware may be authorized if it has dual purpose. The idea being, if we want to use it for other things that meet the criteria, great, but that education and socialization is not a criteria for disallowing it. It's a secondary purpose that gives us the ability to use that definition.
We also have to look at it in terms of if it's being used as an outcome device, that outcomes are covered under DME and we can't duplicate it. So probably tending more toward the adult side of the conversation.
You know, the last phrase of that sentence might be made a little clearer, to be used by any other person other than the person.
Other than the recipient.
Yeah, whatever we call our recipient.
Beneficiary.
There's too many persons. And a few others are there too.
Good point.
Not one of the others.
Right.
So that's it for me.
All right.
That was fun.
What about SES and
So like going home and jumping in a hot tub.
We're going to have to bring over that part for crisis to crisis consultation and specialized consultative services, but we have not touched national sports education, so I don't think there will be any changes.
I'm sorry.
I was asking about
Carrie is a very
I'm sorry, I'm having like a one-on-one conversation
soft-spoken
with Kim.
person. And that sounded important.
I was asking where SCS went, and it's just gonna go into crisis. We talked about that last time.
Okay.
So
Yeah. And then national supports education, we haven't made any changes.
All right.
So what's the plan then, these are going to open?
Well, let me get Deb, you want to talk about your timing?
Once Kenneth gets the changes to me, I can start putting it in the waiver template. And any other straggling comments, and anything we need to add from HCBS, or anything that we need to add from our conversations with HSRI and Burns and Associates. So I'm hoping to get this up in the next few weeks for public comment. We'll post for 30 days, respond to the public comment, and then send on CMS.
So here's what I'd suggest, so.
Is that the entire waiver document?
Yes.
But we haven't discussed relative as direct service employee. We haven't discussed limits on sets of services.
We will have everything go up on the web as our public comment. We'll send this group that final document that we will post. Okay? We have all the opportunity in the world to comment during that period of time. I'm going to suggest that we would not do a meeting during that period because we want to give you all a break. We will get, once we've gotten comments back, because we're going to run into deadlines in time, I would suggest that we'll probably try to, once we know when we're posting, try to schedule a meeting really quickly after the end of the posting, even though we might not have all the comments and responses done yet, but I think we want to do that because we don't want to hold up. But that seems to be the right plan, to get you back one more time for a touch base after the comments have come in. Does that seem reasonable? Now, that doesn't mean, I'll just say, once we've, well, let me add this, is that if willing, or probably if willing, or if you want to substitute somebody else, what we would like to do is to be able to periodically call upon you as it's going to CMS. One is we talked about having a training effort and the other things that we'll be doing with the waiver, but use you as a touch base group, at least till the time we get to the implementation. But some of you may decide that I've had enough of this and would like to ask you to invite somebody else to report it on Friday afternoons, and that would be fine. But it would not obviously be at the same intensity that we've been meeting this morning. So that's how we'd like to do it. Now, we'll, as soon as we know when we're posting, and what I would think, Deb, is what we want to do is send to this group what we will post, maybe a day before we post, just so that it seems like that would be fair.
How is that posting going to be announced?
Well, we'll announce it through we have a pretty large email list that we've developed through the stakeholder groups and the listening sessions and everything else that we've done. We'll do it through the DHHS newsletter. I think it's suspected will go in the Medicaid bulletin. Does it do that? I don't know. Maybe not. Probably not. But we'll go through a whole, just every source that we get, we'll get out to the associations, our email list and our newsletter. It's a good way to get you guys to sign up for our newsletter. And obviously you all will submit, I'm sure, to your associations and other folks too as we go on. So we'll do everything we can to get it to every possible group we want, but we'll ask you to help us do that also.
Once again, what's the projected timeline before that final piece comes out to us?
Why don't we say 3 weeks? Deb said that she takes a couple of weeks, but we'll aim at 3.
We're waiting on still waiting on some rate information.
So we may, and what we'll do is if it's not going to be out in 3 weeks, as soon as we know that, we'll let you know. We'll shoot you an email. But let's aim at that, saying, that would be first or second week first week in June. We'll probably think about that. I want to, and again, thank all of you who volunteered or who were volunteered to spend the time here, and we'll make sure the folks that aren't here know that, and because it really has, hopefully you've seen your comments have made a significant difference in what we've done in terms of changes here. I also want to really give great kudos to Deb and Kenneth and all the other folks from DMA and DMH who spent their time working on this and doing all of the listening tours. It's, I'll say this, and I want you to take it the right way. It would, I know a lot of states that do things like this, in terms of staff timing, it would be a lot easier for people to just go back in the back room and write after doing those listening tours and not have this kind of group. We would be in a product would not be anywhere near as good, but it would have been easier. And but we gained a richness, I think, from this process. And the people that had the most difficulty of having to deal with that are the folks that had to go back and rewrite every time. So we really appreciate their work. And I will say this, none of them complained. Well, at least not to me. They may have complained. Yeah, that's a good. None of them really complained. And they never complained about you. So that was really good. So it was wonderful. But anyway, thank you all. Yeah, for doing this. And so you'll get a notification in the next couple of weeks about the time and we'll